This is your reality check.
Welcome to The Reality Check, the Canadian show that explores a wide range of controversies and curiosities using science and critical thinking. I'm producer Pat, and we have two interesting segments for you today. Darren's going to explain to us, or try to explain to us, how AI image generation works and look into whether or not it's actually copying people. And then Christina's going to dig into the origin of the computer term bug. I hope everyone out there is staying safe and healthy, and we will talk to you soon.
How do image generators work is what I'll explore today. There's been an explosion of AI-generated art in the past months. Midjourney, Stable Diffusion, Dall-e are all amazing AI art-generating models that have the ability to generate images from a text description. You can pretty much type in whatever you can imagine, and you can create it, if you're willing to put the time into figuring out exactly how to request it. That said, most of these image generators do not allow for violent or sexual images. There's blocks and controls there.
Yeah.
I first mentioned Dall-e in June 2021 on TRC episode 629 when I was discussing thought-to-image generation. That was about how brainwaves could be read to produce letters, and the letters could then make words, which could then be used to generate images by Dall-e, the first version. Now we're at like Dall-e 2 or more, but people just call it Dall-e. So even though it's no longer the first one.
So yeah, Microsoft's Bing Create is
they do that too.
Dall-e.
Yes. Things have gotten much better since that time. Heck, we even had a time when people complained about AI images getting hands wrong. Too many fingers.
Yeah.
That's now past. And that's how fast things are moving. Something that was a complaint months later now is gone for the most part. There also seems to be an ongoing confusion about how many of these AI image generators work. Chiefly that these AI systems are copying the works of other artists. Mm-hmm. It often might look like that, but what is actually happening? Let's explore. That's what I'm going to talk about today. In general, large data sets of images and a lot of computational power are used to train various machine learning algorithms that can then generate new images. Statistical associations are made between aspects of features of the data and the words we use to describe images. If your data set is large and diverse enough, there'll be few limitations to the types of images and art you can generate. If it isn't as diverse or it's smaller, there may be difficulties generating certain types of images or the reliability of such images. To take a very simple, not quite representative, but a simple example, if your data set only consists of 10 different types of fruit, even if you have many thousands of images, it is unlikely your image generator will do well making images of dogs, cats, or sunsets. If your data set consists of millions of images that all have good text descriptions, the models can work wonders and produce many different images in many different styles. Now, where did all those textual descriptions come from to train these models? Well, many web pages describe their images in alt text for accessibility reasons or search reasons. Mm-hmm. And also around 2015, various machine learning algorithms could label images without needing much human assistance. So then there's all this data, image plus description of image, that can be captured automatically. This is what forms the bulk of the training set for these models. In other more specific cases, humans have provided overt descriptions. Like, exactly tell me what this is, right?
So someone who's training that algorithm will go in and manually add those descriptions.
And so sometimes you hear like there's lowly paid people in other countries that their job is thousands and thousands of images to really describe things.
Wow.
To really train the system. But it's, again, usually the bulk is automatic. Mm-hmm. It could be just general crawling through the web, or as people say, Reddit is a great source, right? Because you get to upvote certain comments, and that means it's higher quality, which means it's a better data-rich target. So if you're generating an image of a raccoon flying a plane, say, it's tempting to think that the AI models are looking through their training data and then sort of splicing together copied parts from training images involving raccoons and planes. Yep. But that's not what's happening. Yep. It's generating new content based on all the learned associations from its training set. To further tax our human minds, image generators don't understand the features of images the way we might, but rather numbers are assigned to the various pixels that make up an image. And it is these numbers, when associated with each other in complicated statistical ways, that enable images to be created. That's a sort of still high level here. But how does it really work? I'll attempt to give a non-technical explanation, which I'll admit may not entirely succeed at. The issue here is that typical descriptions almost immediately use mathematical terms to describe latent spaces and other complexities. For example, Wikipedia says, quote, "A latent space, also known as a latent feature space or embedding space, is an embedding of a set of items within a manifold in which items resembling each other are positioned closer to one another in the latent space. That's fine for technical people, but for everyone else, it might as well be a latent space is a way of representing data in a simpler and more meaningful way. For example, if you have a lot of photos of different animals, you can use a latent space to group them by their similarities, such as size, color, shape, etc. A latent space is like a map that shows where each photo belongs in relation to each other. That's what Bing Chat said, by the way. That's a quote.
Nice.
Yeah. I was looking at all these different sources. I'm like, what if I just asked Bing?
Yeah.
And first I asked it about how diffusion models work, because that's how a lot of these things function. And that wasn't as useful specifically asking what a latent space is.
Okay.
Here's still Bing. A latent space is usually created by using machine learning algorithms that learn from data and find the best way to represent it. The algorithms try to find the most important features of the data and use them to create a lower dimensional space. For example, if you have a 1000 by 1000 pixel photo, you have 1,000,000 features. Each pixel is a feature, so that's 1,000 times 1,000, okay? 1,000,000. But you can use a latent space to reduce the number of features to, say, 100 by finding the most relevant ones. So there's a bit of like compression here, which is where they use the term lower dimensional space, which means it's easier to manipulate and do things with, because obviously 100 is a lot less than 1,000,000.
Mm-hmm. And 1,000,000's not even that big. That's 1 megapixel.
Well,
it's
nowadays.
1/16th of what Midjourney can generate.
Yes. So going with Bing here, a latent space can help us understand and analyze data better because it can show us patterns, relationships, and similarities that are not obvious in the original data. It can also help us create new data that is similar to the existing data by using the latent space as a guide. For example, if you have a latent space of animal photos, you can use it to create new photos of animals that don't exist by mixing and matching features from the latent space. Mm-hmm. So that's the end of the Bing Chat thing. I think that's helpful, but I want to explore this concept a bit more. Just because when I was thinking like, would I really understand this? Is this clear enough?
Yeah.
So I happily came across an explainer video from Vox, linked in our show notes at trcpodcast.com.
Great website.
And I'm going to use their example of what a latent space is. To start, I want you to picture two separate things in your mind. First, a red balloon. Second, 3 yellow bananas in a bunch. Okay, so you got a red balloon and you have like 3 bananas in a bunch. Let's imagine there is a model that is being trained. How can these AI models process the difference between a group of pixels that makes up the red balloon and a group of pixels that makes up the yellow bananas? Again, the pixels are just numbers that are coding these images. So the models look for ways to distinguish between these things using a multi-dimensional mathematical space. But before we get there, let's just consider one dimension, or characteristic for our purposes. Dimensions are like characteristics, again, for our purposes. Like yellowness, measured on a horizontal line. Okay, so your amount of yellowness is measured on a horizontal line. Bananas are on one end, and the red is not so close. It's sort of on the other end, because bananas are far more yellow. They are separated in space. So you actually picture them along a line, not grouped together because one is more yellow than the other. But what if there was a yellow balloon? Oh, well, this means the yellow balloon gets placed close to the bananas because we're only looking at yellowness. And that's not good because bananas are not like balloons. We don't want them to be the same thing. So we can add another characteristic or dimension, let's say roundness. So we're starting again. You picture your yellowness on a horizontal line, and the roundness is on a vertical line. So now we can differentiate between a red balloon and a yellow balloon and the yellow banana. I know it's hard to visualize, but you can picture in 3 different spaces in this little axis where there's a horizontal line and a vertical line. Mm-hmm. But of course, if we look at more data, we might end up getting balloons that aren't so round. A lot of times people are getting their names spelled out in letters in balloons or any other number of things. So, okay, what do we do about that? Well, can we think of another trait, characteristic, or something that we can use to differentiate between the items that we already have? What about a third dimension, like shininess? So balloons often are shiny in a way that bananas are not. They have a spot that reflects light. So now you can imagine there's different types of balloons and bananas and different colors of balloons, and they're all in a different physical spot in our imagined 3-dimensional space. Okay? But we want AI models that can recognize many more types of things and also to be able to generate a huge range of images. So we need more characteristics or more variables, otherwise known as more dimensions. As the models go through training, they find variables to process all those images so that different things are different. That's the key thing. The models that we've created are sophisticated enough that that's what they can do. This method leads to the creation of a mathematical space much larger than 3 dimensions. Let's say over 500 dimensions. Now, this is impossible for humans to process, because we have trouble with 3 even, if you're having visualizing this. But that's the power of the math here. Also, many of those dimensions won't necessarily make sense to a human. I gave you examples of color and shininess, and that's accessible. But how an AI might see things, it doesn't mean those categories or dimensions are going to port over to how we see things. But those dimensions may not make sense to us, but they're going to help separate the images into what we humans would consider meaningful clusters. Clusters in a sort of geographical sense in this higher order dimensional space. So the models create a region, again, a theoretical region, right? It's just a mathematical space here that captures the essence of, say, banananess, or a region that captures the nature of turtles, or one for snow and another for globes, and snow globes is somewhere in between. That's definitely right out of the Vox thing. So let's imagine there are these 500 points in this space. Okay. When you put in a text prompt, the text allows like a path to be traced or found through that space to locate the thing that is being represented by those words. That sounds good, but we're still just with numbers, remember? It somehow has to go, we still have to go from numbers back into an image. And this is then where the diffusion comes in. Okay, so I did ask Bing Chat a few times, and this is what it said. Diffusion models work by adding noise to the photos, which makes them blurry and distorted. Then they try to remove the noise and make the photos clear again. By doing this, they learn how to make realistic images from scratch.
Wow.
They do this repeatedly, though, as you can imagine, many times repeatedly. The key idea is that you can have a noisy image as input, and if you can produce a relatively less noisy image as output, you can do this many times and generate the images we know and love. And when I see that, it still seems like there's something missing to me. But I think, honestly, that's just the limitations of my human brain. Maybe yours, maybe not, but mine. So first, it's just really hard to imagine millions of images of training data. This is beyond my comprehension. Yep. So you have that issue. And then a 500 or higher dimensional mathematical space. I can't imagine that either. And then there's the algorithms that can reduce the noise and take those pixels and turn them into images that humans understand. And also, I can't really understand that. So there's it's like a triple whammy thing here going on, which I think is just makes it very difficult to understand how these things work. Even though, when you type the words, you get the image. It has to work somehow. It's not actually magic. It's just very impressive and interesting.
Yep.
So as the Vox video says, due to some randomness in the process, the same prompt does not return the same image, right? Otherwise, it would. If it was a very deterministic process, and in a way, if it was looking up a specific feature every time, you should get the same thing. And if you use a different image generator, you'll also get a different result. Why? Well, A, it was probably trained with different data by different people offering different validations, and perhaps by different even algorithms. And all that makes up a different latent space, a different higher dimensional cluster that's organized different features in different regions, such that when you try to describe something, it finds, we'll say, a different path in it doesn't look like a different country, so to speak. So that was a long way to go, but that's why image generators are not finding or copying art. They are generating it, right? Yes. That's where we're going here. But that said, there are still important considerations, like whether using everyone's art to train a model is fair, and just how to deal with AI models that can outperform human artists once they are trained on that artist's style. One can't copyright a style, at least in many of the countries right on Earth, but it does seem like something unfair is happening here.
Yeah, people become very emotionally charged at the topic, so a lot of artists are very offended at the idea, and they will very strongly, confidently claim that they're just copying. I don't think that's a fair description of the technology, like you explained. That's not to say that their concerns are not valid. But yeah, definitely when someone's duplicating someone's art style, I can see why someone is upset at that.
Oh yeah. If I took decades to hone something, and then in a short period of time, someone could feed in my images, train it specifically on that, and churn out new content in a way I couldn't. That would be not only disheartening, but threatening my livelihood. And even, that deeper, what am I here for? What are my abilities, my value?
Yeah. And the other concern is just because AI generated art is so easy to make, it's a concern of it kind of replacing or displacing actual artists and their livelihood. Where is that going to lead? I don't know, right? Like, being an artist is already not, it's not a great way to make money. Some people do make money for it, but they're kind of the outliers. They're the extremes, right? So I think some of those concerns are very legitimate. It doesn't mean that the AI art is always going to be used in that fashion. But AI art also has the ability to expand on what an artist is able to do, right?
Yes.
If you look at a computer animated film, it's all done with, it's maybe not done with AI, but it's done, it's facilitated through a computer, right?
Oh, very
it's
much
replacing what someone used to be able to draw by doing something way more detailed. So,
and all the special effects of all the action movies.
Yeah. Right? So it's always sort of been automation and computation that is facilitating something, and that's been true of like any field since sort of technology's been just exploding recently. So yeah, it's a complicated question. I understand people's concerns. I think some of the way they say it is wrong, and they're not. Yeah, they don't want to understand the technology. They're just kind of annoyed at it.
Well, that's true. I think other people like probably just don't believe it almost.
Yeah.
Like, how could it possibly? And they even say like, well, why does this have like a little signature line? Looks very close.
Yeah.
It's like, well, because the system doesn't understand what it's doing. And when it quote unquote was processing or trained on images that had a signature in a certain spot, it just thought that's how these things are.
Yes.
So if you're going to ask me to generate an image, images have the little signature block. So I'll just make up something that looks like it's going to fit.
Yeah. So if you say like, you ask Midjourney, Midjourney is the one I played with the most. I played with Bing a bit. If you ask Midjourney to say like, give me a movie poster of X, they'll just be like junk text on it.
Yes.
Because movie posters have text on them.
Yes.
Right? Or say like, I was doing this today. I said, Bing, make me a meme of a cat with the whatever the cat. So it's got text on it. The text, it's gibberish. It's, so yeah, there's odd things like that. So yes, absolutely. When you see something that looks like someone's signature, it's very easy to be very angry at that because you see what it's actually doing is it's being inspired by an actual work of art that someone signed. And that's true, but it is much like a human artist would, taking what it knows and making something novel.
Yes. And as you said, like the anger is also, I think it's broadly justified because it is the case that someone is often not getting compensated and a big company comes in and does the thing, right? I think Photoshop is now moving, at least with their system within the Photoshop, the AI generated stuff, that it's only using copyrighted.
Well, they have their own like Adobe stock footage.
Yeah, so like people are supposedly compensated in the right way versus the other systems where maybe it's not the case. Mm-hmm. As you said, like who knows? Like some artists, you can imagine they're empowered, right? There's a lot more people who wanted to be artists who now can create images because they never could because they weren't talented.
Yeah, to me that's nice.
Yeah, that's great. That's in theory, that's very empowering. But like in every situation, there's always sort of winners and losers and costs and benefits. Yeah. And this stuff was a bit predictable. Like, and I talked about it a couple of years ago, but it seemed like the world's caught off guard. And so
I'm surprised at how quick it got good.
Well, yes. Well, a lot of intellectual property, artist rights, this sort of stuff, legal issues, they're being, litigated right now. I think the most recent thing is that unless you've done like a substantial amount of work yourself, you can't copyright AI art for commercial purposes.
Yeah.
Which then it's amusing when someone who's created it says like, no, this is mine. You're like, well, okay. Yeah, people are often inconsistent in their own direction as usual.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see how it goes eventually. Imagine, the video will be there and maybe 3D virtual reality stuff. And
I think right now it's very good at just like, here's an idea, make me something totally original. But I think what this technology could lead to a lot of is like, okay, I am an artist. I drew this thing. Now I want to animate it. So I feed my kind of like concept art into a system, and then I make me a comic or make me a video or make me a whatever where I can describe exactly what it is. So it can be a very powerful tool to assist the artist rather than to replace the artist. And that's what a lot of technology has always done, even in the art world, right?
Yes. I'll just add, I think if you are an artist or someone who has a specific vision of what you want, then I find it's very hard to use these things.
Yes.
But if I look at my friends'
Yes.
creations, you're like, that's amazing. And of course, you're the one who created it. You're like, but that's not quite what I wanted. It's not quite what I meant. And so that's also an interesting world here, that if you know what you want, these can be used as inspiration or tweaks or aspects of things. But we're not yet at the stage where, read my mind, you know what I want, make the thing.
Well, if what you want is vague enough, it's very good at it. But the more specific you get, it's very difficult. Like even something like a man walking a dog. It's very hard because they'll the man will have a dog face. Like it's hard to do two things without the things being mixed. Right?
I think a lot of them are much better than that now, right? They even understand aspects of compositionality, as they say, like this is holding this or the color of this is the right thing. I think it's that, can you use the commas in the right way and the dashes and the so on. But interesting times. All I have to say is image generators are really complicated. I'm sure someone can write in and correct me if I did anything wrong in my explanation. Happy to be updating my own beliefs about it. But in general, they are generating images, not copying them.
I first came across this delightful story on popular website and YouTube channel Today I Found Out. It really piqued my interest because I had never contemplated where a term I've used so many times, especially in the late 90s and more specifically in reference to my Windows PC, where it had actually originated from. The term bug has long been widely used to describe a malfunction in software or a glitch in a system. It is especially ubiquitous in the fields of engineering and computer science. Adam, you'd know about that.
Absolutely.
As defined in Wikipedia, software bug is an error, flaw, or fault in the design, development, or operation of computer software that causes it to produce an incorrect or unexpected result or to behave in unintended ways.
We don't call them bugs. We call them deficiencies.
I call them defects, but that's what we call them in the quality control world. So
right.
The term debugging, which refers to the process of identifying and rectifying errors, has become a recognized concept. However, what I'd love to know is, how did a colloquial term for an insect come to be synonymous with a computer error or glitch? Now, you guys have likely heard the most commonly recounted origin story, which dates back to September 9th, 1947. Technicians working on the Harvard MK2 or Aiken Relay Calculator, which was an early computer constructed by the U.S. Navy, they encountered a puzzling electrical malfunction. And the team who worked out of Harvard University were trying to figure out why their computer was delivering consistent errors. So they cracked open the computer's hardware, and lo and behold, they found a moth, which had flown into the computer, causing a short circuit in one of its electrical relays. One of the team members, Dr. Grace Hopper, a computer language pioneer, more on her later, taped the crispy critter in the computer's logbook with sellotape, writing beside it, "First actual case of a bug being found." So the initial computer bug was quite literally a bug, and then the term became commonplace to describe a computer glitch. You'll be happy to know that the bug and the page it's taped to reside at the Smithsonian Museum of American History in Washington, D.C. Isn't that fun?
I got to see that someday. There's Transformers there too, so.
Well, there you go. Sounds like a great trip.
Next to the Cosby sweater.
It's next to the...
Is Cosby sweater really there?
You guys wouldn't
Zach
get that.
Galifianakis does this. He's like, oh, is the Don Draper suit... It's up at the Smithsonian. He's like, yeah, next to the Cosby sweater. And then John Hamm just loses it. A little side note on Hopper, because she's a badass. She earned a mathematics doctorate from Yale University in 1934 and was one of the first computer programmers. She was the inventor of the first English language data processing compiler, which established the groundwork for the creation of machine-independent programming languages such as COBOL, a language she actively contributed to developing.
And we still use today.
Yes.
She was also a U.S. Navy Rear Admiral. I'm serious, badass. So cool story, right? But wait! Did you know the use of the word bug to refer to an error or glitch can actually be traced back nearly a century prior to this event?
Wow.
What?
As Today I Found Out states, the first recorded use of bug, wait for it because I thought this was super interesting too, in this context comes from American inventor Thomas Edison, who in a March 3rd, 1878 letter to Western Union President William Orton wrote, "You were partly correct. I did find a bug in my apparatus, but it was not in the telephone proper. It was of the genus Calbellum. The insect appears to find conditions for its existence in all call apparatus of telephones." So Calbellum is actually a funny Latin play on words. The word call refers to a telephone call, and bellum means war or combat in Latin. So it's like Edison is saying he's in battle with this hardware glitch, which is super fun. In another letter later that year, Edison explains his use of the word more clearly, quote, "It has been just so in all of my inventions. The first step is an intuition and comes with a burst. Then difficulties arise. This thing gives out, and it is then that bugs, as such little faults and difficulties are called, show themselves, and months of intense watching, study, and labor are requisite before commercial success or failure is certainly reached." I feel like he could have said that with way less words than that.
Yeah, probably.
He wasn't Tesla.
Yeah, that guy didn't achieve enough. He should have been more succinct.
Now, no one knows for sure where Edison got the term from, but there's a theory that it might have come from a common problem with telegraph systems. Back in the day, electric telegraphs could only send one message at a time through a single wire. This became a big issue as telegraphy gained popularity in the mid-19th century, and the only solution was adding more wires, and that was really expensive. So inventors worldwide started looking for ways to send multiple signals over a single wire, which we now called multiplexing. By the 1870s, some inventors had managed to create working multiplex or acoustic telegraphs so that multiple signals could travel along a single wire, and a receiver tuned to a specific frequency could pick out the intended signal from the rest. So, fun fact, among the inventors who worked on these were Alexander Graham Bell and Elisha Gray. Their research actually into sending acoustic frequencies over telegraph wires led them to discover the principles that paved the way for the telephone. So super interesting, at least to me anyways.
Yeah.
Multiplex telegraphs did a decent job, but they had a little issue. They would sometimes create these weird signals that sounded like loud clicks, almost like bugs buzzing. Interestingly, in 1873, Thomas Edison came up with a clever solution to this problem. He patented an electronic contraption he called a bug catcher or bug trap, which quite likely inspired the term. Now, Edison's frequent use of the word bug in letters and notebooks resulted in it being picked up by the press. An 1889 article in Pall Mall Gazette stated, "Mr. Edison had been up the 2 previous nights working on fixing a bug in his phonograph, an expression for solving a difficulty and implying that some imaginary insect has secreted itself inside and is causing all the trouble." Now, in 1892, engineer Thomas Sloan took the initiative to formally establish the term, and in his Standard Electrical Dictionary, he defined a bug as any kind of problem or issue in the connections or operation of electric devices. 3 years later, the Standard Dictionary of the English Language defined it as a glitch or flaw in the functioning of a quadruplex system or any electrical equipment. So as the early 20th century rolled in, the term became firmly established among engineering circles and started seeping into everyday vernacular. A 1931 ad for the world's first commercially successful pinball machine. Do you know what that is, Pat? The first world's... You're the pinball man.
I don't know.
Oh, I'm sure
Baffle ball?
John knew.
Have you ever heard of?
I'm sure John would have known. Yeah.
It's called Baffle Ball, and they advertised no bugs in this game. I should say that like no bugs in this game. See, I can't do that.
No bugs in this game. See.
Renowned sci-fi writer Isaac Asimov helped propagate the term in his 1944 short story, Catch the Rabbit, writing, "U.S. robots had to get the bugs out of the multiple robots, and there were plenty of bugs, and there are always at least half a dozen bugs left for the field testing." It seems that although the term had been used for decades, it really wasn't until the moth incident that the word bug would become inextricably tied to the field of computer science. British cybersecurity expert Graham Cluley wrote, "While it is certain that the Harvard Mark II operators did not coin the term bug, it has been suggested that the incident contributed to the widespread use and acceptance of the term within the computer software lexicon. And this is fun. To this day, September 9th is celebrated by computer programmers around the world as Testers Day in commemoration of Mothgate. For show notes or to discuss this episode, visit our Facebook page and website at trcpodcast.com. For general inquiries or to send a topic or parody suggestion, email info@trcpodcast.com. Help support the show by leaving a review on iTunes and liking us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter at @TRC_podcast.